Welcome to the Mystic Detectives podcast, where we seek to unlock the wonders of the unknown. I'm one of your hosts, Crystal Miller.
And I'm your other host, Andrea Marziano. Hey, Crystal, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very well, thank you. In my neck of the woods, the Pacific Northwest, which is not usually hot, it is hot and very humid. And we're just surprised. And I know you're used to humidity, but oh my goodness, I was doing something with very low effort earlier today, and I was just like, "Ah, I am melting, literally melting."
Yeah.
And I mean, I say hot, and it's probably like 75, but for us, that's just weird. Anyway, and the humidity level is high also. I had something out drying in the kitchen. Well, you know me, I clean bags and use them again. Anyway, it was drying and it took 2 days for it to be
Right.
dry, and it was open, propped on something. It's that humid right now. It's
Right.
ridiculous. So anyway, I know we're Gen Xers, and what I've noticed is there are a lot of pictures that are coming out that some people say, "Oh my gosh, that's AI. I can see it right off." And other people like
Right.
myself say, "Oh, I didn't look that closely." And there are times when I see something that is clearly AI, I'm like, "Seriously?" And it matters to me. Other times it doesn't. What are you seeing or feeling
Okay,
about
so
AI generated
it's
pictures?
it's a double-edged sword, actually, because I think generating pictures with AI is really fun. And if um, some of our listeners may be on our Facebook, in our Facebook group, and I like to post pictures there that are AI generated, and not to be deceitful, of course, by any stretch, but just because they go with whatever I'm posting, when I'm posting on behalf of the group. And we on the flip side, like, I understand the competition that creates for artists, human artists that aren't AI. And I don't want to detract from that. Um, but it's still, but going to the other side, we're new, we can't afford to pay for pictures. And anyway, that's my weird rambling way of saying how I feel. I love to play with AI.
Mhm.
Um, I was talking to Holly Sue about it. Actually, it's funny that we decided on this topic today because you didn't know I was talking to Holly Sue. And she said maybe just some sort of disclosure, that we do sometimes use AI, and that it's not meant to be deceptive. It's meant to be fun or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
and
kind
I
of my
guess
take.
I get that. Well, and I guess there's times that I care if it's AI or not. I mean, if I'm seeing someone that's supposed to representing an actual person that
Right.
is talking about them, and either they've been AI to the point that now they don't look like themselves, or AI because it's supposed to
Or
make
doing
them look,
something weird or gross. Yeah.
yeah, then I have a problem with it. Or if it's something that says this is a historical picture of blah blah blah, then I
Mhm.
have a problem with it. I think it's less so if I'm doing something sort of an animated thing already and just say, "This is a fun take on this." And maybe that's what we get to do. Say that when we're doing it, whether we're doing it for the show or doing it in our general lives, is say, "This is a fun, potentially AI picture, or it is an AI picture
Mhm.
that I wanted to share because I thought it was cool and it represents this to me,"
Yeah.
which is a different experience, I think, than like say having some famous person doing something ridiculous. Or I've seen some of these ads recently where it's like, "This is this person and this is what I think." I'm like, first off, your lips aren't even moving right. And
Right. Right.
secondly, this doesn't seem to track with your personality. But if I didn't know the person, I wouldn't know that. So I can see
Mhm.
that as misleading. Anyway, I
Mhm.
just was thinking about that recently and I wondered what your take was. So I'm glad you shared.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Great. Well, today we have another fantastic guest. And as always, we'll go ahead and let her introduce herself and take it away.
Hello.
Hi.
So,
Hi. Okay. So my name is Caitlyn, and I currently read tarot at a local witchy shop called Witchy Yoga Girl here in Utah. Um, and I also teach tarot there as well. So yeah, just kind of on this tarot uplift right now. So
Tarot trajectory.
Yeah, just
TT.
like, whoa, apex. Yeah.
There you go. I love it. That sounds awesome. So when you teach tarot, well, first off, before I get into that, let's backtrack. And what made you interested in tarot?
Um, honestly, I was so I was up my upbringing was very religious, of course. I feel like we all kind of have that. And
Hmm.
so
Mhm.
I actually knew for a while that I had witchcraft in my family. But it stopped with my grandma, and my mom was like, "Don't touch it, don't touch it." So of course I touched it a little. So
Of course.
just a little bit, yeah. So I got my first deck of
Of
cards because
course.
you go to the bookstores like Barnes and Noble and stuff like that, and they have it there. And for me, it was kind of just like, oh, it's pretty, but it's also it's a little occulty. Like that's cool. So I think I got my first deck maybe about like 10 years ago, and
Hmm.
not necessarily understanding it, just kind of being like, this is so cool. I'm like that crystal ball lady at the carnival kind of vibe. But once I started getting
Yeah.
into it, connecting to them, I started doing readings for friends and stuff like that. I was like, okay, there's something to this. So, yeah.
Hmm. That's awesome. Now, you say that you feel like that there's been a little bit of witchiness in your family as you
Mm,
grew up. Do you have some
mhm.
examples of what that means to you or when you started picking up
Um,
things?
well, my mom has told me before, like I said, I had like my grandma, they're from Portugal, and
Mhm.
so they do a lot of witchcraft there, like a lot of, it's part of they don't call it that, of course, but so anyways, I was finding myself doing witchcraft just no without giving it that name. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So throughout my life, I was
Mhm.
starting to do essential oils and like herbal remedies, and I started farming and stuff like that. And so my main focus in witchcraft is herbalism. That's kind of my
Mhm.
green witchery. That's my calling. And it wasn't
Mhm.
really until I gave it that name, like was able to put it, why I did the research, watching the videos, what kind of witch are you, that kind of thing. And I was like, I kind of vibe with that. I'm already doing all that, you know.
Mhm.
So it was just kind of slowly over
Yeah.
time. I'm also born and raised in Hawaii, so it kind of is one of those things as well, where you do farmers markets and you get herbs and you do massage and stuff like that. So kind of just came naturally, I guess, over time. So
Right.
That's super
yeah.
cool, and what I was thinking as you
That's
were
really
saying
cool.
that is, to me, as a Gen Xer, that's like Earth Mama, and that's what I've always considered myself, and we've
Yeah.
spoken to a few witches recently, and I get that I must be a green witch then because of the things that I do, and I'm a massage therapist, and I do herbs, and I always have these strange bottles of things. My whole family's like, "What is that?" And,
Yeah.
it's cool stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
some people might think my kombucha is witchery, but,
Yeah,
Oh
no
my
um,
kidding.
gosh. I just started kombucha because my friend just gave me a SCOBY and I'm so excited about it. So that's funny.
super cool. We'll have to
Yeah,
check in later and I can show you how to make some candy out of your SCOBY because you will have prolific SCOBY and it's quite
that sounds
delicious.
awesome. That sounds
Yes, so
awesome.
we'll do
Yeah.
that offline later as our witch program. So my granddaughter is here. Well, our granddaughter, because we have a shared history, but she is here and she likes it. She and I are the only two people in my world that I know of that like it, but it's
Mm,
still awesome. So, what other kinds of things do you feel like with that amazing heritage you have? As
mhm.
you can see, Crystal and I have pretty much nothing very interesting going on. Really big,
White.
like early Caucasians here. And I listen to people with all these fantastic, I mean, that's not a slur to Caucasians at all. I'm just thinking so many people have so many cultural things that are really awesome. And I
Yeah.
don't have that in my family history particularly. However, I know coming from Irish families, we probably have a lot of stuff going on that I just don't know about. So when
Mhm.
you have the family history from Portugal and also Hawaii, do you have some Hawaiian or Polynesian descendancy as well?
Yes. Yeah. So I am mostly Portuguese and Hawaiian, and then I have a bunch of other things going on, but I just say Portuguese Hawaiian because it's easier.
That's probably, yeah.
Yeah.
So do you find that some of what you do is probably from your heritage more than other things, or does it come from another area, do you think?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of it is part of my heritage. I found once I got onto this journey, funny enough, I got called into more ancestral work.
Mm.
So I started in like even like deity work. So the more understanding I have there, the more I'm like, yeah, I'm already kind of doing that. Also, you recognize like, so diet wise, as funny as that sounds, I'm noticing that I'm like, oh, okay, because people will say, oh, that don't eat that, that's bad, and I'm like, no, we've been eating this for hundreds of years, okay, like that's why I eat it, you know.
Mhm.
So just stuff like that. So yeah, like going through this journey and kind of being like, huh, this is, I was taught this. I went to a Hawaiian high school. So a lot of the
Mhm.
stuff I'm doing is like, oh, wasn't there like a legend about that?
Right.
So yes, I would say a little bit just kind of naturally happens. So yeah.
That's really fun. One of the things I wonder, and we ask a lot of our guests this because it's just such an interesting question to me, is with some of these things or gifts that you might feel like you have, was there a time in your life where you noticed it, or a time where you had it and then turned it off, or have you ever experienced anything
Mm,
like that?
yes, definitely. So I would say especially when I was in college. So that was my first time being away from home. I went to a college in San Francisco, and it was like culture shock. I was feeling so disconnected, but that was when I was having premonition dreams a lot. Like I would have a dream about my mom. It wasn't the best
Mhm.
dream. So I would call her, and within a few days she was like, "Oh my god, that's what happened." And I was like, okay, I was like, this is, from my upbringing, this is devil stuff, like
Mhm.
you shouldn't know things before it happens. So yeah, I would like suppress. And, eventually it would kind of fizzle out, but there was always times where it would start coming back. And, I would say the strongest point where I was fighting with it was at that time. And I actually
Mhm.
started going to church
Mhm.
again, even though I left the church when I was a teenager. I needed
Yeah.
answers because I was like, I'm scared, you know.
Of
And
course.
yeah, and of course it just scares you more. Like you go to church and they're like, yeah, what are you doing?
Right.
Like, so yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you decide to become comfortable with it again?
Well, funny enough, moving to Utah, because people think this is like the Mormons hub, which it is. However, there's more diversity. I've lived here on and off for the past 5 years. We've been going between Hawaii and here. And
Mhm.
so settling here, it was like recognizing all the witchy shops that have opened up recently, and not being in my
Yeah.
parents' house kind of helped a lot too, because they're not religious, but they're still Bible people. So
Mhm.
um, so I was able to really explore it at that time. 3 years ago, I would say was when it was like, okay, that's it. I'm a witch and I'm so done.
Right.
Like I want to be a witch. It's fine. So once I really got into it, funny enough, my mom was finally like, oh, I mean, I kind of see why you do that. And crystals, yeah, I like crystals. And so once we were able to have that separation, my mom was finally open to it. And they are kind of like, yeah, our daughter's a witch. you know? So, yeah.
So, this is a, crystal that Crystal gave me
Beautiful.
some years ago.
Gosh,
Do you remember
no.
when,
Long
Crystal?
time ago.
And for our
Wow.
listeners who cannot see it, it's a giant sphere globe. No,
Globe.
what's it
Yeah,
called?
it's a quartz
Fall.
Globe.
crystal ball.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
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 that's what it
yeah.
is. And I have ever since she gave it to me, I've had it on my desk and through
Beautiful,
a variety
yes.
of jobs and such, and it really assists me. And so, yeah, my family knows I do a lot of crystals and that sort of thing too. So it's really fun when we can start relaxing into it. And sometimes I think some of this is just age going,
Yeah.
I really am not so
Yeah.
concerned about what
Yeah.
other people
Yeah.
think. I get to live my truth. And
That
when
is so true.
and when I feel like we can lean into this, it opens up so much, and that's
Mhm.
super exciting. So with your tarot,
Sorry about that.
Crystal is It's breathing. You get to breathe a little bit more. Take some nice breath. Oh, yeah. We're having a breathing lesson, dear listeners. If you're yawning a lot, actually, physiologically, the reason is probably, unless you're super tired. Now we're passing it around, but unless you're super tired, just because you're not breathing deeply enough and exchanging the oxygen you need to. So there is the medical lesson for the day.
But it's not medical advice.
So when that is not, yes, every single podcast. This is not medical advice. Although, actually, I must say, breathing I recommend as medical advice.
I will concur with that.
You just get to
first thing breathe.
I want to tell you a funny story, just really quick. It's very short, about that crystal ball, and that is the moment it was like, I'm Andrea's. I was so pissed. Not at Andrea. I was pissed at her. Pissed at the ball. But I know that they get people where they get to eat, and so.
And I was glad. I can't remember if you told me that story or not, but actually, once you say that, I have a vague memory.
Yeah.
And that brings to mind, a lot of people will say stories like that about a crystal they see or they find, is I really thought it was gorgeous, but it wasn't mine. And
Yes,
it's have you noticed that also, Caitlin?
Yes. I definitely have had a few. Like, I think a lot of the reasons I have crystals is just to give them away. I mean,
Right.
honestly, like I have them in my house, and if I have a certain friend over or they have a party coming up or something like that, I'll pass by the crystal and I'm like, okay, that's the one, like I'm shopping in my own home kind of thing.
Sure.
So.
Sure. I get that. That's awesome. That's fun. And back to the tarot, you bought a deck because you thought it was pretty.
Yes, but let me look up the actual name, because I just don't want to butcher it. Because honestly, this is so it's called Fairy Tarot Cards, and it's by Radley Valentine.
I have that one.
So it's kind of hard not to.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And I'm obsessed with fairies as well. So that was also, like, kind of backtracking a little bit. That also was what opened me up to this. Was ever since I was a kid, like single digits, I loved fairies, and my whole room was decorated as fairies. And I wanted to be a fairy forest, so I had vines everywhere and fairy figurines and glitter. And honestly, it wasn't until I married my husband that he was kind of like, yeah, that's a lot of fairies. But so that was another beginning. That's why those cards called me, was because I was like, oh, I already love fairies and there's a fairy there, so okay. And just kind of recognizing, like, I just like the magic of it, like. And so when I bought that first tarot deck, it was like, oh, magic is already kind of in me. So
Right.
So when you started reading the tarot, like I said, you were looking at it for yourself, and did you start feeling like you were getting guidance or something, or how did the tarot begin being important to you?
Well, for a long time there, like I would say seriously, like 8 years probably after getting that first deck. It was more of just me kind of like closeting, like, kind of reading, just obviously looking at the book and not necessarily thinking this could be intuitive at all. Like, that just didn't seem plausible at the time. So I would do like a card a day kind of thing and be like, okay, this is from me or whatever. And it was hidden from my parents for a very long time. And I ended up just having it in a box for a long time. But then I ended up accumulating more tarot decks over time. And then funny enough, that deck found me again. And I ended up giving it to a friend of mine. Because I was like, hey, I don't vibe with this anymore, but maybe you will. So it started with the deck, but then the deck kind of hid itself away from me because I think I needed time to be like, I do read tarot, So I was closeting it for a really long time there. But now I have a million.
Right.
So
that's so fun. I also have quite a few decks. In fact,
Yeah.
enough that a friend of mine made these little holders for me for my cards.
Pretty,
And
yeah.
yeah, they are. And they have ribbon and stuff. And I like them. And she said, "Do you think other people would like them?" I said, "You probably need to give me another one to be sure."
Well, we need to test drive it. Yeah.
That's right. But anyway, so I usually use them with myself, but occasionally during a Reiki or a massage session, I'll just feel to draw one for someone, and not even
Mhm.
necessarily in a form or anything like that. And when you're teaching people how to do the tarot, how do you recommend people use it? I mean, I know I use it kind of off brand, if you will, but also I feel like I use it with my intuition of the moment.
Mm,
But
yeah.
what do you talk to people about?
So, one of the first things I let people know in my class is, well, obviously introduce myself. I say, "Hi, I'm Caitlin. I'm a tarot reader," and I say, I base most of my readings on intuitive, and I think most people should as well. A lot of the symbols and stuff like that is actually already in us. We just have to pull it out and wake it up again. So usually what we do is we'll start with a theme. I'll say, "Oh, today's theme is this." So this past week's theme was we're all burnt out. And so it was basically the 3 card layout. I like to do that because it's a nice storyline. It's a good
Sure.
starting point for
Yeah.
people. So the first card was why you're burnt out, how to solve it, and the first step to take, kind of thing.
Mm, mhm.
So usually, I'll tell people wake up your cards however you need to. People tap or they'll shuffle. Some people who come to my class have never even touched a deck before. So usually those are the people I tend to spend more time with. I have
Mhm.
regulars who come as well. I swear to God, it's just therapy at this point. Um, every week it's just therapy. So, but anyways, yeah. So usually when I tell people, okay, flip your card, it's in this place, right? And I say, okay, and so they'll go, oh, like I'm like, before anybody picks up that book, I say, did that card make you feel good or bad? Let's start with that. Like that, what was the first emotion that came up, right?
Uh-huh.
And that I tell people emotion is just another way of your intuition trying to speak to you. So I let them roll with it. I'm like, okay, so when you pulled this card, how'd that make you feel? Made me feel bad. Oh, why? Just pull it out. Why? And these people read the cards for themselves, honestly. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, I just kind of give them the platform that they feel safe to.
And
Yeah.
that's huge because especially if they come from a background where these can be evil, air quotes,
Right.
then it can feel scary, even if they don't feel like they still believe that. A lot of our things that we're raised with are so ingrained that it's
Hmm.
really challenging sometimes to get past that. And whether it's from a religious background or for some other reason, like maybe a family member just had a dark experience or something like that.
Hmm.
I know that a lot of people I talk to have dark experiences with Ouija, but Crystal has a daughter who really feels good about them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was at a thing, an overnighter when I was about 12, and I now look back and realize that the house I was in had some really dark energy. And I feel like that's why I didn't feel comfortable from the get-go. I couldn't have said that specifically at 12, that that's
Yeah,
what
at
I
the
was
time.
noticing, but I did. I just didn't feel comfortable in the home, and not for any reason I could identify. I couldn't say anything specific, and I have no idea who it was now at this point because I moved shortly after and whatever. But we did the Ouija board and we did that lifting game. I can't remember what it's called. The
Oh,
yeah,
stiff as
yeah,
stiff as a board.
Yeah.
Flat as a pet, stiff as
stiff
a
as a
board.
board. Yeah, and
Yes.
that felt really, really creepy too
Right.
there, but I did it somewhere else. So anyway, my point
Hmm.
is that the environment can make a big difference, and it can also make a person feel comfortable, like you say, Caitlin, that you help them feel safe. And that's a huge deal. And then as they start feeling safe with you, they probably start
With
feeling safe with
themselves, right.
themselves. And as you're doing their air quote therapy sessions, then
Yeah.
you can assist them in that way too. I think that's really awesome. Now, you say you usually use the 3 card format. I know that some people with the books, they say this card means this card means that. If you have someone looking at a card and they're going completely rogue, do you do you guide them back, or do you let them go rogue because that's what their card says to them?
Oh yeah, I let them go wild for sure.
Mhm.
Because a lot of the
Mhm.
times, like, well, somebody would be like, "Oh, this card is making me feel this way. Oh, and I'm going through a divorce, so maybe that's why. And this is telling me this." And it could be, it's funny because even when they are rogue, it's still accurate, you
Yeah.
know?
Mm. Mhm.
Um, because then it'll all pull in, it'll tie together with the three. That's why I like the three as well, like I said, because I noticed that people like almost a slow build into the whole storyline, like I said. But yeah, I mean, I like to hear people, uh like I said, I'll pull it out. Like I feel like I'll ask the right questions, but they are
Mhm.
all, even when they're rogue and they kind of go a little off kilter for a second, I'll sit there and they always come right back to exactly the meaning of the card,
Yeah.
which is
Wow.
I've never failed me yet. So
Wow.
Well, the thing is,
That's
and
really
I think when we had Holly on to talk about tarot, she also said this, but one of the things about the tarot is that it's based on the archetypes. And so while we all have different experiences of the different archetypes and different feelings about them, and I mean all sorts of things, they're s- they're all still the same archetypes. And I
Mhm.
think that is one of the key things that, like, that's how the tarot works. Like, that's the beautiful part about it, I think.
hmm yeah, like I one of the things I tell people is anyone can do it because this is your subconscious speaking
Mhm.
through the cards. Um,
Mhm.
so whenever people come to me for readings, not even just to my class, just for readings, I don't like to sit there and say I know all, because I'm like, we all are capable of doing this. This is all embedded in us, the symbology, the understanding of the deities, and kind of
Mhm.
the storyline of the fool, the tarot. That is, we are the fool, right? So it's all embedded in us. That's what's funny.
Yeah.
Is just you got to
Yeah,
wake it up again.
exactly.
Mhm. I feel like that's true with any of the skills or gifts that our guests and our clients and ourselves speak of, is that it's
Yeah.
in there and it's very much the same. It's just how we bring it forward. Because I notice that there's people that say, well, mine is the best. Well, and your results are what? And
Yeah.
also, I get to the same place or a place I like better or something. And it's not, I was talking to someone about how there were several Reiki masters at the same event. And they're like, well, that's not really fair because we're all Reiki masters. And I said, uh-huh. And well, and I said, do you feel like there's not enough for everybody? Do
Right.
you feel like, do you feel like somehow one is better than another? I feel like with this and in any aspect of healing arts, if you will, that people are drawn to the person and then they're drawn to the practice.
Mhm.
And
Right.
and I think that's important to remember. And also, if we live in scarcity, that's what we'll receive.
Yep.
Right. And I mean, yeah, like to me, there's obviously competition with, people always kind of feel that way. I'm like the least competitive person, So like whenever I feel those energies arise, I'm just like, you can do that alone. I'm like,
Right.
we
Right.
we all have something different to offer, bottom line. It's like so I've had this person who's come to my class for he's been coming for like 2 months now. And he I have another tarot reader who helps me out because sometimes I have a class of like 10 and I'm like,
Mhm.
so, and their name is Addie, and usually I'll have them with me,
Mhm.
and so at the end of the day, he was kind of deciding who he wanted to be his, because he wanted to pay one of us. And he picked me, and we just looked at each other and we were like, cool, and it wasn't like, you picked her. Why'd you pick her? It's
Right.
like, I feel like there's like that basic understanding. It's like whoever you vibe with, like I've done
Yeah.
Reiki and I felt like nothing happened. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
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 but it
Mhm.
doesn't mean they were terrible. It just means that we were not vibing.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And also it depends on so many different factors as well. So
Mhm.
I agree. I think that's good to recognize and to remind people. And I don't know if you told the client that you guys were both cool with it or not, but he probably felt that or he probably wouldn't have I mean, he truly may have just gone away because he didn't want to rock the boat. So I
Yeah.
get that he really felt comfortable saying what he really wanted. And that's kudos to both of you for being able to set up an environment that he felt that way. And so
Yeah.
that if you haven't recognized that as a cool thing, I would like you to do that because it really does say a lot about both of you.
Yeah, I mean, it's you just get to the point, like you said, of you're just like, okay, I don't even care anymore. Like you're
Mhm.
just like, I'm not gonna waste my time with that kind of thing, and you also recognize like, hey, I want this guy to have a good experience. I want it to work for him. And it's like if he vibes with me, okay, then it'll work.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fun. And so when you do this, you do your class, and is it set up more as a group reading? Or what does that look like when you do the class?
So basically, what happens is, so like I said, I give a theme. Usually, I give a little spiel about the theme,
Mhm.
and can we all? It's funny enough, the things I go through, everyone else is going through. So, like I said, this last week was we're all burnt out, and everyone is laughing because they were like, "We are so burnt out," and so I was like, "Okay, well, let's figure out why." So what we do is we do each one card, with like three spread. So I'll go, okay, let's do the first card, flip. Okay, and I'll hold mine up and I'll say, this is what I have, and this is kind of what I'm getting. I always say this is what I'm getting because I feel
Mhm.
Mhm.
like it's like we're conduits. This is what I'm
Mhm.
getting, pulling it out of. And so then I'll go to each person and I'll ask them, I'm like, so what are you getting? Or how did you feel about this card? They'll sometimes they'll look at me and they'll go, I don't know what this means. And I'm like, okay, well, let's put it back down and like, did you feel good about that card when you pulled it? Oh no, not really. It made me feel kind of sad. Okay, why? What do you see? And then we start breaking it down that way. And like I said, 100% accuracy from everybody in my class. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's crazy. So in most people would be tempted to put it back and draw another one, but you really
Mhm.
had them dig through why they felt that way, yeah?
Yes, and even when it comes to reverse, or I say
Mm.
straight or reversed.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I asked them, I said, if it's reversed, I say, did that look right to you? Or did it not? And
Right.
again, 100% accuracy, people will flip it. And I'm like, okay. And then as we go on to explaining their experience or their current situation, it's like, okay, perfect. It wasn't supposed to be reversed. So yeah.
That's
I really
interesting.
like that
Yeah.
method. What did you see when you had your business, Crystal? Did you see tarot card readers of many types, or
Oh
was it
yeah.
just Holly?
No, I saw tarot readers of many types, and Holly also taught a class for a long time, and so I got to see lots of new tarot readers emerge. So it was um, it was awesome. She was a very, very good teacher, and that she had lots of high praise for her classes. But then she just decided one day that she didn't want to do it anymore. So,
Yeah. She's still a very good teacher, just teaches other stuff now.
yeah, now she teaches economics and
Yes,
Oh
history.
wow.
which is whew, so different.
That's also important.
Yeah,
Yes, it is.
With
Somebody
I
gets to
mean,
understand
I
that.
know with what's going on in the world, it's like, can someone tell us what's going on?
yeah, no kidding, no kidding.
Wow. And so you do the tarot at your job, it sounds like.
Mhm.
What else do you do there?
I sometimes work this shop. So Witchy Yoga Girl is, like I said, it's a locally owned shop here in Utah, and the owner, her name is Sheena. She does consignment for a lot of local artists. So when I'm not doing tarot, when they need help in the shop, she'll usually, sign me up for like a few, I don't know, just a shift at the shop. And I always say I'm
Mm.
the shopkeep, like the old
Yeah, of
timey
course.
shopkeeps, because you know yeah, I'm like, hello, I'm the shopkeep here today. So, but yeah, so I
I can see
basically
you in a
just,
I can see you in a medieval costume and your long sleeves and, all of it.
yeah, like, hey, welcome. Uh, and I do, like, that's how it is. That's what I love about the shop is she's like, whenever somebody comes in, you basically go up and talk story with them.
That's so fun. I was in Utah last week. I wish I had thought about going there because I had heard about
Dang.
it from Natlin? Is
Madeline,
that
yeah.
Oh,
Natalin?
Madeline, yeah,
Right,
yeah, she's awesome.
right, and I didn't even think of it though. But so as you're doing the shopkeep, what, how do you feel doing that? Do you bring people into a direction of tarot, or how do you wear the different hats?
So usually when, like I said, when it comes to the shopkeep role, like my boss makes it a point for us to go and talk story to them and to say like we're locally owned and most of our products are from local artists. And just like, hey, did you come in for anything specific today, or whatever. And um sometimes if I'm there and there's no tarot readers, I will also say I'm doing readings, and I can't do them in the room if I am the main shopkeep, because obviously I have
Mhm.
to watch the door and stuff. So
Sure.
we'll do it out on the floor on the table, and I'm like, it's a quick 10-minute one. um but yeah, usually if I'm in the shop, there's a tarot reader already there. But yeah, it does get kind of like funny that way, because once you get to a certain point, you're kind of like, you want a reading, like you all want it so bad, but you're just like, okay, I'm just so yeah. I do have to separate it most of the time, where it's like I'm just here to dust, like
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not here to talk to your guides. I'm here to just rearrange and dust and make sure you get the full experience of our shop.
That seems like that can feel a little challenging when you're just hearing voices going, "They must have a reading right now," and, uh
Yes.
and so
Yeah,
I get
it
that as a
is.
possibility. And I like I say, when I do Reiki, I don't normally bring in cards because I guess in my mind, I sort of separate the things out, but I've gotten less and less apt to do that because more and more trying to follow intuition. Um,
Mm.
and one woman came in, and as soon as she walked in, I knew I got to give her a reading. And I don't have any professional training. Like I said, I just do
Mhm.
by intuition.
Don't
And
need it.
and she, after I did that, because I said, before we start the session, I feel really strongly about doing this. Are you open to that as part of your session? And she said, yes. And then we did it. And then we did the Reiki session. And afterwards, she said, you know what's funny? And as we all know, it's just spirit guides. She said, I had wanted to have a reading today, but I knew I was coming for Reiki. So I didn't even think about it.
Mm,
Wow.
wow, that's awesome. That'll
And
happen.
and that's when
Yeah.
I know that the guides are strong. And when I'm open to it and have invited them into the session and such, that they will present themselves. And that's where we've talked with some of our guests about how do you open yourself to the universe or open to yourself to the guides and keep yourself feeling comfortable. Do you have things that you do before a session or before a class that might assist you to keep your balance and your disconnect when you get to and connect when you get to?
Well, usually what, like, like you were talking like energy, right? Like kind of stopping your yeah. So for me, I've never really had an issue with energy, because usually my how I do it is, like I said, I'll talk to their guides. And I feel like the moment I step into that room, or the moment I sit in front of those cards and there's a client in front of me, it's different when it's like a friend or a family member. But when it's like, okay, this is a
Mhm.
client, that space has already been created. And I tend to just get connected just from having that person sitting in front of me. And I like to say that they are kind of the ones who run the show. And I just kind of spew whatever I feel needs to be said. Sometimes, as what's funny too is the guide will make me work a little harder to, like I'll be like, okay, maybe I'll read the cards first and then see if their guides have something to say. Some people's guides are there the moment they sit, like they're sitting, and I'm like, oh, hey, I had this one woman who came in, and her guide was so strong. And well, she had a few of them and they were all trying to talk at once. And people who work with, like, interdimension stuff, it's not necessarily hearing, it's more of like images and stuff like that, and it'll be like so
Mhm.
I had so much of that, and I had to be like, okay, one of you guys needs to be the leader, the others need to sit the hell down, like stop, you know.
Right, right.
So usually though, energy wise, it's like it kind of comes from them. So I never felt like I've used my own, if that makes sense. The only time I really feel like I've used my own energy is like if I do events and it's boom, 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 but you know, like I haven't been able to. It's more of mental for me. It's more of like, oh, this is the space where the guides can enter and I'm safe. It's not even like a big ritual. It's just okay, this is the safe space, you know.
Mhm.
But when I'm doing an event, I don't have that, right? I don't have that
Mhm.
safe space where I'm like, the moment I walk out this door is when I'm back to Caitlyn, the mom or the friend or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, when I don't have that space is when I definitely feel my energy. And usually I mean, for me, the best thing to do is make sure I've eaten. You know,
Mm.
Right.
if I know I'm doing a big event, I like to eat and I like to have some water. Um, and then usually after an event, I'll drive home and I'll take some deep breaths and I'll usually it'll be intentional, like any energy that's not mine can leave now, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Um and one event I did so many readings. I did like I swear to God, I was there for like 4 hours and I did about I want to say I did about 40 people. Like it was intense.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I came home, I was like expelling. And then I came home and I sat in my backyard and I did just like a grounding meditation and I gave it back to the earth and it was good. So
That's awesome.
it's different for everybody, obviously.
Yeah.
Like for me, it's just like I said, I don't use my own energy for a lot of it. So that's how I
Mhm.
can differentiate that.
I'm the
Yeah.
same. I'm the same. Yeah. It's actually um it's surprising to me when somebody says that giving a single solitary reading is draining because of the way that mine work, in that it's much more that I'm a conduit than, than that I'm providing any of that energy. And so,
Sure.
and
Exactly.
that's not to, judge them. Everybody gets their own experience, but it's just it's just
Yeah.
like the aphantasia, right? It surprises me that they have a different experience, but it is what it is.
Yeah. And I
So,
know that for events, when I've gone to events, it isn't necessarily what I've done in the event, but if you've got a lot of people that are in mystic energy, there's a lot of energy. And that's where I
yeah.
can have trouble is when there's too much energy, where there's too much going on. And I used an
Mhm.
example in one of our episodes about I was in Sedona, Arizona, and I went into a crystal shop. And it wasn't a regular crystal shop. It was a pretty intense crystal shop. They had a lot of wands, they had a lot of pyramids, and they had a lot of just energy.
Wow.
And I was with a group of people that were all practitioners of some sort or another. And I walked into that shop and I'd been looking forward to going into it like crazy because I knew it was awesome. I walked in there and I was like, oh, boy, howdy, I got to walk back out. I
Yeah.
couldn't stay because I was actually having physical symptoms. I was nauseous and suddenly had a headache and all of the
Yeah.
things. And we had been at this event over the weekend. So I was very open and I just couldn't take all of that. And so when I go to events for whatever practice part I'm doing, I will set an intention. I will do my own cleanse and I will just walk in and invite the energies that get to be with me that are in my best interest to be there and then release the rest. And that
Right.
is where I set my boundaries to feel comfortable because otherwise it may not work for me. And when I forget to do that, I usually get feedback from my body that I have forgotten. So,
Mm. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also like to ask for I like to ask for my energy to repel people that won't serve me to work with that day or that
Mm.
period of time.
Yeah, that's something I had to learn the hard way.
Mhm.
There was an event that I went to, like the first event that I did tarot reading. Um, and there was like this group, it was at a college. So, there's a group of like these college kids, and they kind of were not necessarily making fun of it. They were more of just like, "Ooh, this is like I said, a carnival, right? Like it's like, ooh, she's here for my amusement dance, tarot lady."
Yeah. Yep.
And so I was kind of sitting there and I was doing like this reading, and I actually made it was like a specific guy, and I made a lot of his friends emotional because they were like, oh, oh, this is like a thing. Like, oh shit, she's telling me, whoa. So, and I'll tell people about their guides. Like, I saw this lady's cousin standing next to her. I described him, and she was like, "Oh my god, that's my cousin. He just passed away like last month." And I was like, "Oh, he's one of your guides. That's crazy." So anyway, so I had this group come in and kind of like, yeah, basically like he was standing there and listening to the readings of his friends, and I kept being like, "Is it okay that he's listening?" And they were like, "Yeah," because he was just standing there, and I was like, "Okay." And he would be like, "Oh yes, so yeah, so she needs to do that." Like he would be talking to his other friends, like, "Yes, oh yeah, you remember that one that Ashley got really drunk that night? Yeah, this is that. This is why she's telling her that." And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay. And so I was recognizing like, okay, so I really didn't set that kind of boundary where I was like, okay, people like, and I had a few people that specific day who came and were just like, not really. So, just kind of like, why are you here?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why? And so, and I, at the time, because it was like my first event, I didn't know that, you don't just understand like, oh, I can just say, hey, get the hell out of here. Like, I don't want to do it for you.
Right.
It's,
Like that
um,
is almost exactly the way I learned this lesson as well.
mm,
Was that, and when you're new, right? It's hurtful. It's like
yeah,
we think
like I
it's a
did
lot.
something wrong.
Why? Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So I
Like maybe,
feel you.
yeah. And you kind of feel that way. You're like, maybe I am full of crap,
Right?
you know?
Exactly. Exactly.
No, you're not, Yeah. But yeah.
That's funny. I actually like that anecdote you both just shared because I never thought of it that way.
Mm,
Well, it's
yeah,
funny.
there's definitely.
We get stump the psychics that are jerks, right? And then we get stump the psychics that are like, I'm just, just read me. And they really are genuine and want a reading.
Yeah.
And so what I've learned is I want to repel the jerks. Frankly, I don't, I'm not interested in
Yeah.
proving myself. It's I guess that's the big difference
Yeah.
between the jerks. The jerks want you to prove yourself, and then they're going to like,
Yeah.
feel victorious if you somehow haven't. And the non-jerks just like don't want to lead you in any specific direction, but they appreciate the reading, and
Mhm.
and they're not out to like prove you wrong or make you feel like you're full of shit.
Yeah, like they're just like, this is my first experience, and
Mhm.
I had a woman who came and asked for a reading, and she was like in a candle making class at the shop. We also offer that. And I was just, I was reading tarot, and um so she was like, "Oh, I want to do tarot." And the whole first half of the reading was she was like, not really. That's not really." And then at the end of it, it was kind of like it was, at the end of it, it was just a little too on point at that time that she was just
Mhm.
like, "Okay, you were right." She just didn't want to admit it, right? It's just like it was just her
I've had that
bias.
too. I've had that too,
Yeah,
where they were like, "Oh, yeah, this whole thing's actually been true."
yeah, yeah. And she was literally like, "Okay, I just didn't want to admit it, but yeah, you were totally on point from the beginning." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, you have to know where you have to understand yourself enough that that the cards are like gonna." And I always say the cards don't lie, and they'll rip you a new one if they have to. Like,
Uh-huh. We were
Oh,
talking
that's
about
funny.
that in our other tarot episode with Holly. That yeah, sometimes it's like shut up, tarot
yeah,
card.
yeah. Like, how dare you? That's why even as a reader, like I pay my other friends to read me. Like, I
Mhm,
literally pay them.
mhm.
Because sometimes you'll be like, I don't like that card. That's not, because you get biased.
Yep,
And
yep.
yeah, so I've had multiple friends, my tarot reading friends, be like, "Hey, what are you doing right now?" Like, I need some clarity. So, yeah, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either, right? It's like my ego is so big in this situation that I need somebody else to kind of bring me back to earth a little bit. So,
Yeah, yep.
Well, and I
I
think
agree.
it's too I think also even outside of the ego is we sometimes don't trust ourselves enough, which to me is sort of
mm,
opposite. is when I do Reiki and I'm talking to people and I'm letting them know what their guides might be saying or what images I might be seeing or feeling, or if I'm doing mentoring or something like that. I trust myself completely in those situations. But sometimes when it comes to myself, especially because historically I have made some very poor decisions, and so it's like, is my spirit guide leading me, or am I just convincing myself yet again that
Right.
something is good when it isn't? So I think
Right.
it's, even for me at least, and the people I've noticed this with, is it has more to do with the fact that maybe we don't trust ourselves with us because we're
Mhm.
second guessing everything. But when we're reading for a client or a friend or whatever it looks like, we are actually trusting ourselves because we know our gifts are true.
Right.
But for some reason, at least in my instance, my gift may not be true for me. How does that make sense? Well, it doesn't, but that's really what the
Right.
bottom line is, at least for
Right.
me.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. That's so true. Because you're like, okay, well, and like I said, it's kind of that bias in that way where you get like, is that really what I'm going through? You know, it's
Yeah.
almost,
Yeah.
yeah. That's very
Yep.
accurate. Yeah.
And also, no, that's not what I'm going through. Okay, it is, but I don't want it to be. How can I change
Right.
that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
think this card is broken. I
No,
need a
thank you.
different one.
Not that one.
I say
Yeah.
no. That's right. I like the
Yeah.
pretty one.
I know, yeah, like I swear the other day this happened where it was like I had the full spread, but sometimes what happens, so I'll spread it out. I look at it and it's just almost like a wall. So it's not I'm not even getting anything. And I'm like, "Whoa, what the hell?" But then like a couple days later I come back and I'm like, "Oh, because it's almost like you have to go through it first and then you see it laid out and you're like, "Oh," like kind of it's one of those because my mom had the biggest issue my mom had with tarot is she was like, "Oh, you shouldn't know your future," and I'm like, okay, tarot has never been a future kind of necessarily. Like people call it divination tool. Yes, it is, but it's guiding you towards this path. That's all it is. If you don't
Right.
take that path, I don't give a crap. You know.
Yeah, and I don't
But
Mhm.
know
it's
what's
like
gonna happen. So
yeah, it's like, but
yeah.
currently, this is if you continue on this specific path, this is how it'll lay out, you know?
Right.
If
Yep.
you don't, that's up to you. I don't care.
Right.
So,
Right. Yep.
yeah.
Well, and that's interesting too, because it's sort of like, instead of knowing your future, it's like you have a map. You can take this road. There's an alternative over here, and there's an alternative over here. This one looks like it may serve you better.
This one's
However,
actually paved, but if you'd like to go over here on this muddy one or over here on this landslide one.
Yeah. Right,
yeah,
exactly. And that's kind of another thing I like to tell people is, I'm like, if you continue on this path, this is how it will look. Because one
Mhm.
choice will change all of it significantly,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
It's not a prescription, like it changes.
Right.
darn it.
Exactly.
Darn it. And wait, so what you're saying is I still have my free will, even with
Yeah,
a
right.
tarot
I
reader?
know.
I'll
That's
be
I've had
damned.
yes. I literally had people come in or I had well, okay, so like a specific phone call and they were like, "Is it this person who's talking crap about me?" And I'm like, and I actually knew. The funny thing was her guides told me who it was. As
Oh,
she was telling me the story, I saw the image of the person. And this is over the phone, so I'm like, okay, her guides are pretty powerful. But
Yeah.
she kind of stopped listening to them and has went for healers, and I was telling her, I was like, you have guides who are trying to tell you what is going on. Well, just tell me, was it her? Was she the one who's talking crap about me? And I'm sitting there and I told her, I was like, that's not important. Like knowing who
Mhm.
did, like,
Mhm.
it's about like connect. I was like, you need to connect more to your guides. I'm like, they have a lot to
Yeah.
tell you, and they have been trying to tell you, but because you're so like, okay, this psychic didn't tell me what I liked. What did this psychic? How are you over here?
Yeah.
sure.
And
Yeah.
they still do it, and it's like, we us at the shop are getting to the point of like, okay, we can't because we're not the ones who are like you said, it's like, hey, you have your free will. I'm not going to sit here and play the psychic game. It's like you do what you think is right, you know,
Yeah.
and listen to your guides, like everyone's guides are always trying to get a hold of them one way or another. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Totally.
One of my favorite things is thinking about the guide situation, or however a person might get their enlightenment. Is I feel like there's a lot of people, and I think I've been one of them at times, is I will ask my guide, spirit, God, whatever it is I want to call it, what should I do? And I've looked at it as a telephone call. I'll call and say, hey, what should I do? Click. And then I don't listen for the answer. and
Yeah.
and there are
Yeah.
a lot of times that I look back at what I've done, I'm like, oh boy, I really hung up. and and
Yeah.
and and when our people, our clients, ourselves don't listen like you're describing there, we're going to get the lesson. The universe is going to give us the lesson.
Yeah.
And I've had lessons that were like sledgehammers. I've had lessons that were gentle guidance and through the life and things like that. And I believe moment to moment, I have a choice in what that can look like. And when we're talking about something like a tarot card, that I feel could lead me down a path that would be more gentle and easily flowing, that paved path we were just talking about.
Yeah.
And when we're talking to our clients, I feel like sometimes it's important to remember that these, and this is sort of what we're alluding to, I think, is these are ultimately their choices. These are the things that their guides are saying, and it is not my wisdom. I
Right.
am the voice, the conduit. It's not me, it's the tarot card that is still the conduit
Yeah.
of whatever source you want to look at it coming from. And listen if you will. And if you do, great. It's still not me. And if you don't, still not me. It is your guides. And
Yeah.
so remember, that's where it comes from. And I feel like sometimes, especially as a practitioner that has any kind of psychic gift at all, people will come back and say something and say, well, but you said, I didn't say that.
Right. Right. Right.
And I made it
Yeah.
clear when I started that this was your guide, this was whomever, that in my impression, this is how this person manifested to me, or these words or whatever.
Yeah.
I am the voice. I am simply the voice.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes, I personally haven't had a problem with that, but I know people who have had that. And what do you do to remind the person that you are that conduit, rather than this is your words to this client?
Yeah, when people like people tend to come in with that attitude where they're like, your word is vow, and it's like it's not, it's like
Yeah.
I mean, so one of the things is so usually to keep that clear, right? To be like, okay, I say it multiple times. I say this is the path you're currently on. This is the path you're currently on, and
Yeah.
I took a divination class years ago at this other witchy shop. Actually, this witchy shop gave me my start, and here in Utah, their name is Cat and Cauldron. They're amazing. Also local. And so I went their divination class, and one of the first things that they said was, um, they're like, don't take away people's free will. So remind them this is the path you're on. If that changes, it's because you have changed. You made a different choice along the way or whatever. Um, like it's like we're not, like you said, we're not medical practitioners. It's like
Yeah.
we're just spiritual, and so ours, like anything I say, I'm like, if it doesn't resonate with you, then this was fun, you know.
Mhm.
But yeah, I definitely don't. And you learn to not take it offensively over time when people are like, oh, I didn't really vibe with that, because then you're just like, okay, maybe in a month you'll remember and think back on it and be like, oh my gosh, that's what that
Yeah.
reader said. And I was like, it's just not the right time right now, or
Right.
what have you. But I was going to say, I like what you said earlier about these are the things that are kind of making the path clearer almost in a way. So we don't have to go through that muddy, that it's like, oh, okay, do you want it paved or do you want it like, oh, this is an obstacle course? Because that's how I feel with all the things I use, like crystals, herbs, tarot cards. It's like, it's just making my path clearer. So it's not so hard to maneuver around this life.
Right. Right.
Exactly. And if you're like me at all too, you're saying, could have used that tool just then. Whoops.
Yeah. You remember that?
Amen.
Like, yeah. Like I have like 100 essential oils, right?
Right.
And I just sometimes I'm like, oh man, my stomach hurts. What am I gonna do? Swallow and self pity would probably be best. Or
Yes.
and
Nat-
or like,
that's a
like,
natural step. Or
yeah,
after I feel
yeah,
better, I think, oh, I could have used,
yeah,
yeah. Or
same.
what about tincture? Or what about,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I have
Yeah.
like a million teas too. Like I have a bunch
Yeah.
of herbs that are just sitting, like that I've bought or that I've processed myself, just sitting,
Right.
you know.
Sure. Well, they're so pretty. Well,
Yeah.
I one of the times I did take a class on using essential oils, and they said the first step is to open the bottle.
Yeah.
Huh.
Wow,
There you
powerful.
go. It really is. And when I think
Yeah.
about the other tools I have and things like the tinctures and all my mystery bottles and stuff, well, open the bottle. That's the first step.
Yeah.
That's
It's true.
awesome.
Mhm.
Well, shoot, we are drawing to the end of our session,
Yeah.
and this has
We
been a
could
lot of fun.
talk for probably 2 more hours, but we can't talk for
I
Right.
2
feel
more
that.
hours.
Exactly. So, what would you like to tie this up with? Put a little pretty bow on this. Do you have any message you'd like to leave?
Ooh, fun. Yes, of course. So, like I said, as a teacher of tarot, one thing I have learned is we all have, like I said, we all have this embedded in us. People think, okay, where do I start? Exactly like you said, you open that tarot box and you just look at to me, it's how do you start your tarot journey is you just open that box and you just look at the pictures, and
Yep.
I don't like to talk down on the books. If people feel like they need to read the book, go for it. But, I guess we're very magical. We're more magical than we think because society has kind of put that on us. Um, I also
Mhm.
can I recommend a book for people? Is that
Yes, please.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's this book that I read that totally amplified my journey, and it's called Heal the Witch Wound by Celeste Larson. And so it's not just about witchcraft either. It's just about just societal norms and why they are the way they are. Research is in there, science is in there, and kind of how to combat that and wake up your inner magic and your inner self and being comfortable and not feeling like we have to hide anymore. So yes, just
That's
basically
beautiful.
we're all magical. We all have it. You just have to take the time to find it. That's it.
Couldn't tie that up with a prettier bow.
I
Very
agree.
nice. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. It's beautiful to meet you guys.
We'd love to hear from our listeners. To leave a comment, share a story, or ask a question, email us at listeners@mysticdetectives.com. You can also find out about our Patreon and other interesting things going on at our website, mysticdetectives.com. As always, we invite you to subscribe, share, and leave reviews to support the podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week. Stay curious.
And keep exploring.